My name is Zion Malik. I'm 34 years old, and for most of my life, I believed in one thing: loyalty to family. Not because it was something taught to me, but because I thought, maybe foolishly, that if I kept giving, one day they would see me. Not just look at me, but truly see me. The oldest of three siblings, I was the one who stayed close when others drifted. The one who answered the phone at 2 a.m. The one who drove mom to her chemotherapy appointments when no one else had the time. We weren't a fairy tale family, not even close. We had our dysfunctions. My father, Farouk Malik, was a self-made businessman. Gruff, sharp-tongued, and stubborn as stone. He built a modest textile empire from scratch after arriving in the country with nothing but a borrowed briefcase and a dream. He respected hard work and loyalty, or so I thought. My mother, Hina, was softer. She held the family together, balancing my father's intensity with patience and quiet wisdom. She always told me, "Beta, sometimes you have to carry the weight no one else can see. That's where true strength lives." I carried that advice with me like armor. My siblings, Adil and Maywish, were very different. Adil, the youngest, was always the golden child. Reckless, charming, and untouchable. He could crash a car and somehow get praised for surviving it with a smirk. Maywish, the middle child, was strategic. She married into wealth and rarely looked back, except when she needed something from our father's accounts. Meanwhile, I lived in a modest apartment above the textile warehouse Dad had gifted me to run independently. It was framed like an opportunity, but really, it was the family's way of keeping me occupied, tethered but not included. I worked 12-hour days managing logistics, inventory, and a team of 20. My father never once stepped into that office. He never asked how it was going. And still, I remained loyal. I remember the day the strange phone call came.
It was a Tuesday, hot and dry.
I was sipping burnt coffee in the warehouse break room, flipping through invoices, when my phone buzzed. "Mr. Malik?" the voice asked, professional but hesitant. "This is Noreen from Siddiqui and Partners. We're finalizing estate documents and just needed a quick clarification." "Estate documents?" I echoed. "You mean for my father?" "Yes, sir. The Malik Family Trust." I froze. My heart skipped once, then again. "I'm not aware of any trust updates," I replied carefully. "What exactly are you finalizing?" There was a pause on the other end. "You weren't informed?" "No."
Oh,
"I'm so sorry. Perhaps someone in your family can explain better." I assumed. I hung up. That night, I confronted my father. He was in his study, swirling a glass of something strong and expensive, flipping through news channels like they offended him. "Baba," I said, keeping my voice even. "Why is a lawyer calling me about a trust one know nothing about?" He didn't look at me at first. Just set the glass down, leaned back, and sighed like I had just disturbed a sacred silence. "It's handled," he muttered. "What's handled?" I asked, stepping closer. Why was I not informed? Why wasn't I included in something that affects the entire family? His eyes finally met mine.
Cold. Detached.
"It's done, Zion. There's no need to drag this out." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what I'd done, or failed to do, that made me invisible in my own bloodline. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. In the days that followed, things got weirder. Conversations paused when I entered the room. Maywish canceled a lunch she had scheduled with me, citing urgent travel. Adil sent a text with no punctuation that just read, "Don't worry about stuff, it's all sorted."
Sorted.
Like I was some minor footnote. I started paying attention. I overheard snippets. I noticed files missing from the office. My access to the family accountant was suddenly restricted. And then there was that one night, 2 weeks after the phone call, when I walked into my father's office and found him burning papers in the old iron fireplace. "What are you doing?" I asked. He turned sharply, clearly not expecting me. "Just cleaning up," he replied. "Too many old things lying around." He dropped the last file into the fire. The edge of the page curled upward as the flames consumed it. I caught a glimpse of the page before it vanished, something with my name and the word disqualified. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and walked out. From that night forward, a shift settled into my bones. Something fundamental had changed. It was like a silent countdown had begun. I could feel it ticking beneath every smile, every casual lie. My entire life, I had operated under one assumption, that love, loyalty, and hard work meant something. That if I stayed grounded, patient, and faithful to my family, I would be protected, valued. But the truth was slowly surfacing like oil on water. I wasn't part of their future. I wasn't even part of their present. I had been edited out, redacted from the story of my own bloodline. They had written the script. Now it was time I flipped the narrative. Something was coming. They didn't know it yet, but I did. The bomb was ticking, and I held the trigger. I wasn't going to confront them again, not yet. Not until I had something they couldn't dismiss with a glass of scotch and a sigh. I needed the truth, the whole of it, in my hands. Not just whispered suspicions or glimpses of half-burned documents. So, I began quietly investigating. My first move was to contact the law firm directly. Siddiqui and Partners wasn't easy to reach. Their receptionists were trained gatekeepers, polished and precise. But I persisted. I called every morning at 9 a.m. sharp. By the fourth day, I caught a break. A junior associate named Mahira slipped up. I thought all immediate family members were briefed, she muttered when I asked about the trust. They weren't, I replied. At least, one of them wasn't.
Oh.
Sorry, I shouldn't even be talking to you. I've said too much already. But it was enough. From there, I pulled on every thread I could find. A few former employees of my father's company still owed me favors. Asked questions carefully, subtly. My old manager, Imran, reluctantly told me the finance department had been quietly restructuring. Personal assets were being shifted into shell companies overseas. All accounts now required double verification, one for my father, the other from a deal.
Not me.
I also discovered that the family estate, including the old farmhouse and a block of rental properties, had been moved into a new LLC. I wasn't listed anywhere in the paperwork. Adil and Maywish were. Even my mother had a stake. But me? Absent. Not even a footnote. It was as if I never existed. The more I uncovered, the colder my fury became. This wasn't some clerical oversight. This was deliberate. Surgical. They had erased me from the narrative like a smudge on a painting. Then came the breaking point. One night, I went to visit my mother. She was in the garden, pruning her jasmine vines, the scent heavy in the air. I stood next to her for a moment before saying softly, "Amy, why didn't anyone tell me about the inheritance changes?" Her hands froze. She didn't look up. Just kept clipping, her voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't worry about these things, Zion. I'm your son," I said, sharper now. "I've been here. I've always been here." Still, she avoided my gaze. "Some things are decided by your father. He thinks about what's best for the family." "For the family," I repeated bitterly. "Does that not include me?" She looked at me then, eyes full of emotion, but lips pressed into silence. And in that moment I knew, even she had known. She had stayed quiet. Just like always. I left without saying another word. The following week, I ran into Maywish at a charity fundraiser. She was all pearls and fake concern, sipping imported mineral water and laughing with women who didn't know half the damage she could do behind closed doors. "Zion," she greeted me with a half-hug. "It's been forever. Are you okay?" I nodded politely. Couldn't be better. Just been focused on my future. Her smile froze, a slight twitch at the edge. "Future, huh?"
Yes.
"I've been investing in new partnerships, consulting, thinking globally now." I paused, tilting my head. Diversifying. You never know when things might shift dramatically. She narrowed her eyes, sensing something behind my words, but before she could respond, I excused myself. Later that night, I watched her whisper something to Adil, and both their heads turned toward me briefly. The walls were starting to close in. They knew I was digging. But they still didn't know how much I knew. That week, I made another move. I called Nadia. She was once my father's personal secretary, sharp, discreet, and fiercely loyal to him. But when he fired her after 2 decades over a petty argument about vacation time, she never forgot the betrayal. We'd remained on good terms. Nadia, I said, I need your help. And I need you to trust me. I always have, Zion, she replied. Your father? Not so much. She invited me over to her flat, a small place tucked behind a mechanic's shop. Over chai, she pulled out a worn leather folder. I kept copies, she said, placing it in front of me. I knew one day you'd need them. Inside were photocopies of the original trust documents from 3 years ago, my name prominently listed beside my siblings as an equal beneficiary. And then, stapled behind them, were the revised papers from 8 months ago. I wasn't just removed. I was disqualified. The reason? Deemed financially independent and without need for trust support. Realigned assets for maximum utility among active family contributors.
I stared at that line for a long time.
Deemed without need. After decades of sacrifice, of showing up, of serving, this wasn't about need. This was about exclusion.
Control.
I can't fight them legally, I said aloud. No, Nadia agreed. They've made it airtight. But that doesn't mean you can't turn the tables.
How?
Her eyes glimmered. Your father's empire wasn't built cleanly. You know that. And you know where the bodies are buried. The idea began to form right then. A plan. Not for revenge. No, something far more poetic. Not to destroy them, but to expose them. For a few days, I didn't speak to anyone. I went completely off the grid, barely leaving my apartment. The world beyond my windows humming along as if nothing had happened. But inside me, something irreversible had snapped. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. It wasn't about money, land, or even justice. It was about identity. They had tried to erase me, not just from documents, but from memory, from legacy, from family. And now, I wasn't going to demand a seat at the table. I was going to flip the whole table over. My plan began with quiet precision. The first step was cataloging everything I had: evidence, timelines, documents, names. I built a digital archive of my findings. Not just the trust paperwork, but the shadowy financial moves I'd uncovered. I even mapped the shell companies, half of which were registered under false addresses or set up in tax havens that didn't track ultimate beneficiaries. My years consulting with international firms had taught me how to trace money like a hunter stalking prey. But I needed more than just a digital war chest. I needed eyes and ears in the places I couldn't reach. That's when I called Hassan. He'd been my roommate in university, now a forensic accountant working freelance after being blacklisted for exposing corruption at his last firm. He owed me one. I explained my situation to him, without sugarcoating. They didn't just cut me out, Hassan. They buried me. I want to show the world who they really are. His laugh came through the phone like a match striking kerosene. Let's dig them up then. Over the next several weeks, we worked like ghosts. No one knew what we were doing, but we were everywhere. We traced payments made to foreign consultants that were siphoned back into management fees through offshore accounts. We found falsified documents used to secure property titles under Maywish's name. We even found a video of a private meeting where my father admitted on camera, albeit drunk, that he had changed the trust because Zion was always too soft.
Too soft.
That one stung more than I admitted to Hassan. Meanwhile, I reconnected with a few journalists. One of them, Nita Shah, had covered several high-profile financial scandals and was hungry for something that would shake the elite class. I gave her a taste, a screenshot of the asset transfers, with names blurred out. "This is big," she messaged back. "But I need permission to run with it." "Not yet," I told her. "Let me drop the bomb first. Then the world can talk." But then things got complicated. A deal began circling. I noticed his car parked a few blocks away from my office one evening. Another time, I found a man pretending to deliver a package to my apartment building. No package in hand, just a phone in his pocket, camera peeking through a torn flap. They were watching me. It meant they were nervous.
Good.
but it also meant I needed to move quickly. Then came a curveball I hadn't expected. My mother called. Late one night. "Zion," she said, her voice fragile. "Your father isn't well. He collapsed yesterday. The doctor says it could be serious." I froze. I wanted to ask why she was telling me now. Why, after everything, she still assumed I'd care. But the truth was I did. "Is he conscious?" I asked quietly. "Barely. He's asking for you." Despite every fiber of my pride screaming no, I went. I told myself it was to see if this was a trick, a manipulation. But deep down, I think I still hoped there was something human left in him. He was lying in the hospital bed, pale and shriveled. Not the towering patriarch I grew up fearing. Just an old man who looked tired. "Zion," he rasped, eyes fluttering open. "I'm here," I replied, sitting beside him. "What do you want?" He struggled to lift his hand, resting it on top of mine. "You were always different." "Different?" I scoffed. "You mean loyal? Honest?" "No," he coughed. "You were never hungry enough. You wanted peace. That's not how dynasties survive. You don't build a legacy by cutting your own blood out of it." He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw something close to regret. But not enough. Not nearly enough to stop what I was about to do. Later that night, I returned to my apartment. I opened the folder marked Final Strike and began drafting the email. It would contain everything: evidence, names, transaction logs. I'd also written a letter. Not just to my family, but to the media, to the board members of my father's businesses, to the public. It began simply. I was erased from my family's inheritance. But what they didn't know was that I kept every receipt, every secret, every lie. If they wanted war, they should have never underestimated the quiet son. I scheduled the email to go out at 9 a.m. sharp 2 days later, giving me time to disappear if needed. But I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I got a call from Maywish. "I know what you're doing, Zion. Think this through. You'll destroy everything." "No," I replied, voice calm. "I'm not destroying anything. I'm revealing it. This will ruin Dad." I didn't answer. "And us," she continued, voice trembling. "We'll lose everything." There was a long silence. "You already took everything from me," I said. "Now I'm just balancing the scales." The morning of the email's scheduled release was eerily quiet. A heavy fog draped the city, like a secret, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. I watched the clock on my wall tick toward 9 a.m., every second thunderous in the silence of my apartment.
Tick, tick, tick.
8:59 a.m. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the city skyline. Tall glass towers my father once dreamed of owning, a concrete kingdom built on half-truths and lies. And now, those lies were about to crumble. 9 a.m. The email went out. Every journalist on my list received it. Every board member. Every distant relative who used to act like I didn't exist. The files were detailed, annotated, undeniable. The truth was no longer buried beneath family politics and fake smiles. It was out there now, alive and spreading like wildfire. Within minutes, I started receiving responses. My phone lit up with missed calls, voice messages, texts full of disbelief and outrage. From a deal. "You don't know what you've done." From Maywish. "You've ruined us. Are you happy now?" From a business columnist. "This is going to shake the industry. Do you want to comment before I go to press?" I ignored them all. Let the world talk. By noon, news channels were already picking it up. Headlines blared across screens. Prominent business tycoon implicated in inheritance fraud, offshore laundering. Anonymous whistleblower exposes decade-long scheme in family empire. But the real firestorm came at 3 p.m. when my father was publicly named. Not by me, by one of his own business rivals who seized the opportunity to drive a dagger into his credibility. Old enemies smelled blood, and they pounced. Stocks fell. Phone calls from allies went unanswered. Clients began backing out of deals. For a man obsessed with image, with reputation, this was the ultimate punishment. Later that evening, I got a call I didn't expect. My father. I let it ring twice before answering. "You think this makes you a man?" he growled. "Dragging your own family through the mud?" I stayed silent for a beat, then replied, "No. But it makes me free." He went quiet. "You were never going to choose me," I continued. "No matter how hard I worked, how much I gave, you saw me as disposable, replaceable. You always lacked the fire."
No.
I just refused to burn others to stay warm. There was a rasp of breath on the other end, sharp like he'd been struck. "You've killed everything I built." "No," I said, voice steady. "You did that the day you buried your own son for profit." Then I hung up. But the storm was far from over. That night, someone tried to break into my apartment. The lock was damaged, and my computer had been tampered with, but I kept backups, encrypted offsite. They couldn't stop what had already begun. And then came the twist I didn't see coming. 2 days after the leak, I received a hand-delivered envelope, no return address. Inside, a single flash drive. I plugged it in, expecting more threats, maybe some corrupted virus. But what I found was another bomb. A secret account, under my mother's name. Millions, hidden, untouched, and tied directly to illegal business activities spanning over a decade. Shell companies I hadn't discovered. Transactions linked to bribery and political manipulation. It wasn't just my father. She had been complicit the entire time. The mother who begged me to come see my dying father had known all along. I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just betrayal. This was legacy. A dynasty built on rot. And I had only scratched the surface. I called Esson. "We have a new angle," I told him. He scanned the files and whistled low. "They were more corrupt than I thought. I need you to verify every transaction. Cross-reference everything. If this goes deeper than we thought, we're not just exposing a family scandal, we're about to tear down an empire." But even as the weight of it pressed down on me, I felt strangely calm. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was leading, and I was far from done. Later that night, I returned to the hospital, not out of compassion but to confront my mother. She was sitting beside my father's bed, her hands folded, eyes weary. "You knew," I said, my voice low but clear. "You were part of it." She didn't look surprised, just tired. "You think I had a choice," she whispered. "You always had a choice. You chose silence. You chose greed. I chose survival." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You chose complicity. And now you'll live with the consequences." She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the truth. Not a victim, not a wife caught in her husband's shadow, but a woman who had played the game just as ruthlessly and won. Until now. As I turned to leave, my father stirred. His eyes fluttered open.
Barely.
"Zion," he rasped. I didn't stop. There was nothing left to say. In the weeks that followed, the empire collapsed like dominoes falling in perfect sequence. Every lie uncovered led to another. Every press release failed to stem the bleeding. Shareholders pulled out. Partners jumped ship. Government agencies began investigations. And the mighty name my father once paraded through every boardroom in the country became a cautionary tale. The family business filed for restructuring under intense legal scrutiny. The media called it one of the most catastrophic falls from grace in modern corporate history. I watched it all unfold from a distance, not with glee, but with a strange, solemn acceptance. Justice wasn't a loud victory. It was slow, clinical, and cold. But it was justice nonetheless. Meanwhile, I returned to my quiet apartment, still littered with files, flash drives, coffee-stained notes, and photos of the past. I didn't clean them up. I couldn't. Not yet. They were fragments of the war I had just fought, evidence that I had survived something designed to erase me. There were days I woke up angry. Not because of what happened, but because of everything I let happen for so long. I had made myself small. I had begged to belong. I had carried their rejection like a scarlet letter across my chest.
But now?
Now I walked taller. Not in pride. In truth, the media eventually got wind of my identity. Some called me a hero, others a traitor. Some said I was brave. Others said I destroyed a legacy out of bitterness. But I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't living under anyone else's version of me. I received messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. College friends, distant cousins, even a few strangers who said, "Your story gave me courage." Courage to speak up. Courage to walk away. Courage to stand in their truth. And that mattered more than revenge ever could. One morning, I visited my father's grave. He had passed away quietly just 3 weeks after the story broke. The media storm meant his funeral was a private affair. Few showed up. The man who once commanded rooms had left the world in silence. I stood there in the cold wind, staring at the gravestone that simply read, Salman Raza Khan, 1952 to 2025. A visionary leader. I scoffed. No mention of the son you cut out, I muttered. No mention of the lives you destroyed chasing perfection. But I wasn't there for closure. I was there to draw a line. I pulled out the flash drive containing the last batch of files, the ones I hadn't released. The ones that named names in government, in international firms, people who had benefited from my family's corruption. I held it in my hand, knowing it still had the power to level more kingdoms. But I had a choice. Destroy it or release it. And I chose neither. I buried it, right there in the soil beside him. A symbolic tomb for all the secrets that had poisoned our bloodline. I wasn't going to carry the weight anymore.
Let someone else find it someday.
Let history do what it does best. Remember, judge, and move on. Later, I met with Ahsan over coffee. He looked different, lighter, freer. You planning on disappearing again? He asked with a smile. Not this time. He raised a brow. So, what's next? I leaned back, letting the sun warm my face through the cafe window. I think I'll start over. New city. New name, maybe. Use what I know to help others. Investigate people like my father. Make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. He nodded. Good. Because we need people like you in the world. I looked at him, grateful. For sticking around. For believing in me when even I didn't. He raised his cup. To freedom. To truth, I said, clinking my mug with his. In the months that followed, I did leave. I moved to a quieter city. One where no one knew my name. I started writing, first anonymously, then with quiet confidence. Stories about corruption, family dynamics, betrayal, and justice. I built a platform where whistleblowers could come forward. I gave them the tools I never had. The voice I had to fight to reclaim. And slowly, piece by piece, I built a new life. One rooted not in legacy, but in integrity. One not based on inheritance, but on purpose. There were hard days. Of course there were. Healing isn't linear. Sometimes I'd wake up with dreams of boardrooms, shouting matches, my father's cold gaze. But then I'd write, or help someone find their voice, and the fog would lift. I never reconnected with Maywish. She sent an email once, short and cold. You should have kept it in the family. But you never knew what family meant, did you? She was right. I didn't. Because what they called family was just control in disguise. But I did find a new kind of family.
Friends. Colleagues.
People who stood by me not because of blood, but because of shared truth. And that was more than enough. One night, nearly a year after it all ended, I stood by the sea, wind in my hair, staring at the horizon. A quiet whisper echoed in my mind. You were erased, but you rewrote the story. And that was my victory. Not revenge. Not even justice. But authorship.
Of my own story.
My own life. And no one, not even the people who birthed me, could take that away again.